Everybody. Hope your week's going well. And we are back with Peak Chapter 19. It was called The Bear and the Bull, I believe. Go back real quick. Bear and Bull. We left off with Zopa explaining to Peak exactly what he's trying to do here with Sunjo, his grandson, things like that. He explained for himself too, and for other Sherpas, that they climb for money, while all the tourists climb for sport. Right? So this dangerous lifestyle, it's fine if it's a sport or something you choose to do, but for a lot of these Sherpas, it's not a choice. They have no other options. So he's trying to give Sunjo an option to not have to do this dangerous climbing lifestyle, and instead make Sunjo a little famous with being able to being reaching the summit of Mount Everest as one of the youngest people ever, and hopefully that will help him go back to school so that he doesn't have to do this dangerous lifestyle anymore. So Peak has a little more understanding of what Zopa's intentions were. And Peak says, "I'm going to make it to the summit," I told him as he walked out of the mess tent. In a strange way, the conversation helped to center me. It reminded me that climbing, even though there might be other people in your party, is a solo sport. Your legs, your arms, your muscles, your endurance, your will are all yours alone. A partner can encourage you, maybe even stop you from falling, but they can't get you to the top. That's entirely up to you. I finished my breakfast, feeling a little better, and walked over to HQ to meet the film crew. Zopa was there, but Holly wasn't. "She's already over at the Porter camp," JR explained. Dr. Krieger had some meds for Sunjo, but didn't want to take them to the camp herself, because Captain Sheck could find that suspicious. Doctors do not treat porters. Holly took them over for her. I guess I wasn't the only one being transformed by the mountain. Holly had undergone a remarkable change since we got up to ABC, and it was clear by JR's attitude that I wasn't the only one to notice. Her voice was still a little shrill, and she still wore her garish clothes, but she had not taken care of me at ABC, and now she was looking after she had taken care of me at ABC, and now she was looking after Sunjo. I don't think she would have done that the first day she got to base camp. JR handed me a small camera, about the size of a sandwich. "I know it doesn't look like much," he explained, "but it's reliable at high altitudes, and it takes pretty good video. Not as good as the one we've been using, but hauling that big unit to the summit is a pain in the ass." He showed me how to zoom in and out, how to frame a shot, how to use the built-in microphone, and how to change the memory, which held about an hour of video. "You have to be pretty close to pick up a voice," Jack explained, "especially if the wind's blowing. Whoever's talking will probably have to shout." "Consider the camera yours until the climb is over," JR said. "We have another one we'll take to the top if we make it that far. You need the practice with it. The hardest part is hitting the little buttons with your gloves on. So practice with gloves. If you take off your gloves above Camp 5, your fingers will fall off, and you'll be pushing buttons with your nose for the rest of your life." Pleasant thought. "What am I supposed to be filming?" I asked. "The story," Will said. What story?" "Well, that's the big question," JR answered. "And part of the fun." "And the mystery," Jack added. "Josh hired us to film you," JR continued. "Now Sunjo's been added to the mix, which changes the story. If you and Sunjo don't make it to the summit, the story will shift again. It might be about how you didn't make it, what stopped you. It might be about the friendship between you two, which was pretty shaky at the moment, but I didn't tell JR that. Or Sunjo and Zopa, or you and your father. The point is that we won't know what the story is about until we know how the story ends. All we can do now is film details. When we get done, we'll piece the documentary together like a jigsaw puzzle." Which is exactly how Vincent at GSS taught me how to put a story together. He wouldn't let me write a word until I finished my research. "Hold the story inside until you are ready to burst." He made me write my research notes on 3 by 5 cards. One on each card. On each card was a sentence, a character note, a scene, a character note, or a detail from my research. When you do your research, write down whatever interests you, whatever stimulates your imagination, whatever seems important. A story is built like a stone wall. Not all the stones will fit. Some will have to be discarded, some broken and reshaped. When you finish the wall, it may not look exactly like the wall you envisioned, but it will keep the livestock in and the predators out. I wonder if Vincent would accept a documentary in place of a moleskin, but I doubted it. It would be great, JR continued, if you could write down your shots. It's not easy to do, especially at high altitude, but it would help us when we edit. If you can't write them down, Jack suggested, you can record what you're doing on the microphone. So yeah, what we just heard all there, guys, about piecing a story together, that's how this story was written. That's how almost every story is written. People have to plan out their entire story. And then, like they said, like a jigsaw puzzle, they try to make things, they might have to add things, they might have to take away things, they might have to change things. But once you have like the big plan for your story, right? You have all the major things planned out, then you can put it together in a way that makes it make sense, that shows your message, your ideas really clearly, things like that. You don't just start writing and see where the story takes you. Okay? You plan out all the big ideas in your story, and then you add all the details after. From a distance, the Porter camp looked neat and prosperous, but as we got closer, it became clear that it was neither. It seemed that everything in it was made out of cast-offs, as if the porters hung around after the climbing season and collected the leftovers from our camp and put it in theirs. There were a couple of shacks that had more flattened tin cans nailed to them than wood. The tents were sewn together from bits and pieces of other tents. The yak halters were made from frayed climbing ropes. The camp had a different smell to it as well. Dung, wood smoke, and the old palm oil that the porters cooked their food in. But the smell and disarray were soon forgotten in the minor stampede of men that came running when they saw Zopa. Sunjo and Holly came out of a battered tent and joined us. Sunjo looked pretty weak, which I wasn't happy to see. I wondered how he was going to do tomorrow when we headed up to ABC. He pulled me to the side. "I appreciate your standing up for me last night," he said. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Zopa." "Forget it," I said, although I hadn't come close to forgetting it myself. "How was it staying here last night?" "It is not as comfortable as the climbing camp, but the porters have been kind." The porters had lined up in a long row, and Zopa was walking down the line greeting each in turn and giving blessings. When he finished, he sat down in a large circle on blankets and sleeping bags and talked, with Zopa translating. A good way to understand what the porters do for a living is to think of them as Himalayan truckers. The only difference is that their trucks have legs instead of wheels and are fueled by grass instead of diesel. The nearest restaurant to our cabin in Wyoming was a truck stop. Mom and I used to go there all the time and we loved it. The truckers were friendly, funny, and full of stories. It was no different with the porters. I got involved in their stories. I completely forgot about using my camera. The porters were from all over Tibet and Nepal, and spent 9 months out of the year away from home. When they weren't hauling gear up Everest and other mountains, they were guiding trekkers or moving supplies at lower altitudes. Some of the younger porters wanted to become climbing Sherpas because the money was better. The old porters seemed satisfied driving their yaks in spite of the hardships. They told us stories about the falls and getting lost. But the most grim story was related at the end of the day by an old porter named Gulu. He was from some village where Sunjo was born. Oh, sorry, the same village where Sunjo was born. Gulu knew Sunjo's mother well and claimed to have taken Sunjo on his first yak ride when he was a baby. The porters and Sherpas were spread out over thousands of barren miles, but there always seemed to be connections like this between them. On the way back to camp, JR said that Gulu's story was compelling, but he couldn't use it in the final documentary. There's no room, which is why I included it here. Vincent taught me that what makes a story unique is not necessarily information in the story, but what the writer chooses to put in or leave out. So I'm going to stop the video here, and we are going to look at Peak Worksheet 5, what you guys have to work on this week. So a couple weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago, we looked at similes. Now we're going to look at metaphors. So similes were when we compared two things using the word like, okay? She is beautiful like a flower, okay? A metaphor compares two things, but it does not use the word like. So she is a flower. Is she really a flower? No. But you understand if I say she is a flower, you understand, oh, that means she is beautiful, like a flower. Okay? So a metaphor, it doesn't use the word like, and it makes it even more like magical sounding, right? She's not like a flower, she is a flower. It uses the word is. Okay? So let's just look at number one together here. No one knew I was up on the wall. By morning, providing someone actually looked up and saw me, I would be an icy gargoyle. So that was from when he was climbing the skyscraper in the first chapter. So the author is comparing. So he said, I would be an icy gargoyle. So he's comparing Peak to an icy gargoyle. And this helps me understand that Peak would be frozen up high on a building. Okay? So I want you to try the other ones. Blah, blah, blah. And then your third page is making inferences. This one's a little tougher. I want you to do your best. It gives you a little quote from different parts of the story, mostly parts that we read last week, some this week. This one is about Holly when she first comes into the camp. So all these inferences, I want you to tell me what do these quotes, what do these characters do that helps us understand who these characters are, right? The things characters say and the things characters do help us understand their personality. So from this first one, I thought Holly was there to interview me, but it turned out that I was there to listen to her interview herself. During the 2 hour monologue, she filled me in on her life, year by boring year. So this is something Holly does, and because of that, we can understand who Holly is. What is her personality? So what kind of person is Holly? I could say she's vain. I could say she's selfish, things like that. Okay. And then I'd explain, how do I know? Well, she's vain because she talked about herself for 2 hours, and only a vain person would talk about themselves for 2 hours. Or she's selfish because she doesn't want to listen to anybody else. Okay? So I want you to look at these excerpts and talk about just what information do you get from it. Sometimes it'll be about character, sometimes it'll be about just what characters are doing or why characters are doing things. Because the book is not always going to tell us exactly what's going on, exactly what the characters are feeling. We have to understand what the characters are doing, understand what the characters are feeling because of the things that happen in the story. Okay? So do your best with those. If you have any questions, post on Teams. And in the next video, we're going to listen to Gulu's story. And we're going to break that down, kind of like how they were talking about how they break down a story and put it together like a jigsaw. We're going to look at how this mini story is like a jigsaw. And it's a really good story. See you then.